Ever since I did my review of Zelda 2, I've wanted to give a similar treatment to its follow-up, and to be honest, it's actually been slightly intimidating to even think of doing such a thing. I mean, we're only talking about my favorite Super Nintendo game of all time here. And also, while we're at it, this review hasn't exactly written itself. I've gone through about 4 or 5 different drafts of the review, and also, as I was playing through the game, I was about 80% done and lost my save file. So I had to start over from scratch there. At least the second time around I was smart enough to actually record my entire playthrough, and without further ado, let's get into the review. Sometimes it seems to me there are 2 separate factions of Zelda fans, those who prefer the 2D games and those who prefer the 3D games. I think it's fairly obvious which side of the fence that I'm on here. I've tried and I just can't get into the more story-driven 3D games. I much prefer the exploration-based 2D games. Perhaps I might not have given them a fair shake. One of these days I'm sure I'll give Ocarina of Time another whirl, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Right now, we're here to talk about A Link to the Past. Not unlike how Super Mario Bros. 3 was a return to form of sorts for that series, A Link to the Past was one for the Zelda series. Nintendo decided to leave the 2D side-scrolling style behind with Adventure A Link and go back to the overhead view of the original game. Just like in Zelda 1, we have selectable sub-weapons, dungeon exploring, blowing up walls, secrets, heart containers, all of those things and then some are here for your enjoyment, now in beautiful 16-bit glory with orchestrated MIDI sound. This time around we're introduced to different incarnations of both Link and Zelda. This game is considered a prequel, being set many generations prior to the first game in the series. And if you've seen my review of Zelda 2, then you already know my opinions on the timeline and the mythology, so I'm not going to trouble you with any of that. Regardless, Zelda games should really be judged upon their own and not how they fit into some kind of timeline or continuity. After all, they're legends. They're not some serialized adventures. The story of this game is summarized something like this. There once was an all-powerful force known as the Golden Power, what we all know as the Triforce, hidden away in a golden land which many sought to obtain, but all had failed. One day evil forces came through from the Golden Land, so it was sealed away by the 7 sages. The seal was thought to be permanent, but after many years, an evil wizard known as Aghanim set into motion a plan to break the seal, killing the king of Hyrule and kidnapping 7 maidens descended from the sages who closed the gate to the Golden Land, which is now corrupted by evil and known as the Dark World. Among those maidens was the Princess Zelda. That, of course, is where the story of this game starts. Link helps Zelda escape the palace and then sets out to obtain the Master Sword. But before doing so, he must find the means necessary in the form of these 3 magic pendants. Upon Link finding the pendants and achieving the Master Sword, Aghanim steps in and puts a stop to their dance party. And once again kidnaps Zelda. Link confronts Aghanim and finds himself cast into the Dark World. In the Dark World, Link discovers the locations in which Zelda and the other 6 maidens are being held captive and rescues them, discovering the true identity of Aghanim in the process. While this game doesn't have the hugely spread out map of Zelda 2, it still has an epic feel to its design. Hyrule's overworld and the Dark World are parallel dimensions with many similarities and differences. There are a few instances where an event in one will trigger something in the other, and there are plenty of puzzles and obstacles to traverse in both worlds. While it is possible to tackle some of the dungeons out of order in this game is more linear than the original. There are a few items you will need to further your journey that are found in dungeons like the Hammer and the Hookshot and the Cane of Samaria. I'd actually compare this to Zelda 2 in that way, because it's not always wise to attempt some of the dungeons out of their intended order, despite it being possible. This game introduces a number of items and elements which I don't think the Zelda series would be the same without. A favorite of mine is the Hookshot, a weapon that helps you in your travels and would be just as fitting in Batman's utility belt as it is in a Zelda game. Also, even though potions first appeared in Zelda 1, requiring an empty bottle to use one first came to be here. I love how you can hold a fairy in a bottle and it will revive you if you fall. Think of it sort of like life insurance. Another thing I love about this game is the music. Every bit of music is ever so memorable, and it really showed off what the Super Nintendo was capable of in the sound department. I was so happy when I first heard how many of the songs from this game were rearranged for A Link Between Worlds, but that's another story for another time. Visually, this game is a treat as well. Super Nintendo had some other games with similar overhead views that came later. Before its time, Link to the Past stood out. Games like Secret of Mana may look a little bit better now, but in 1992, this wowed a great number of us. Little things like seeing the trees down below when you're atop Death Mountain are still pretty striking. The animations of many of the enemies, especially the bosses, still really stand out to me as well. And speaking of those bosses, you know how sometimes in Zelda games, you always need a certain kind of weapon that you can run out of to beat them? So, no arrows or no bombs, you're pretty much screwed. One thing nice here is that frequently, even though an enemy might be weak to a specific weapon, there are usually alternate methods. And while these methods work, they usually take considerably longer. However, if you do know the weakness, the bosses, some of them, seem kind of easy compared to the dungeons that they reside in. And some of those dungeons, especially the later ones, can be brutal. The Ice Palace seems to be something a number of gamers complain about, but I felt like the platform riding in Turtle Rock was the bane of my existence. That got to me worse than the Ice Palace ever did. But it's the kind of difficulty where once you're past it, you get that feeling of accomplishment that usually only retro games can give you. So in the end, it's still worthwhile, even if you find yourself ready to throw your controller. Now there's the question of if you've never played the game, should you? And my answer to that should be fairly obvious. Abso-freaking-lutely. It was the number 5 best-selling Super Nintendo game of all time. It's one of the essential games for the Super Nintendo, if you ask me. So if you haven't, I think you're missing out. Aside from the actual Super Nintendo version, there were releases on the Wii and Wii U Virtual Consoles and a version on the Game Boy Advance. The Game Boy Advance version adds a vocal sound effect from Ocarina of Time whenever Link attacks, which might get on some people's nerves, but it's not so bad. Otherwise, it is an extremely faithful port. Also, while we're at it, we may as well mention A Link Between Worlds on the 3DS. It's not really an exact sequel or remake or reimagining, but it's pretty darn close. It uses the landscape of A Link to the Past and does its own thing with it, and it's pretty awesome, but that's again another story. In closing, this game gets my highest recommendation. I can't really say it any better than that. Now let's hear from you. What do you love about this game? What do you hate about this game? Are you a 2D Zelda person or a 3D Zelda person? Do you have any great memories of playing this game? I'd love to hear about them. Leave a comment down below. Hope you've enjoyed this review. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care. If you like what you see, feel free to check me out on social media. Otherwise, you can subscribe to this channel. I do new videos every Friday, sometimes on Wednesdays too. Once again, thank you for watching. Take care.